Hey everybody, welcome in. How's everybody doing today? How are you guys doing?
Doing super good. How are you, Christy? Good to see you.
Good. I'm good. I'm good. It's good to see you, Ben. Good to have you back.
Good
I
to have you,
love
Christy.
your orange filter fabric that you've got going on there, Spanks. That's nice. Just
I wish it
noticed
was bigger.
that.
It looks so trashy to me. Thank you for saying that to me.
It's a good color. Keep the color if you can find a bigger one. Hey, but that's like a really nice color.
It looks too good to take down, but like so trashy that it bothers me. But it's okay. We're upgrading slowly.
That's how I am. Y'all, my door behind me here with the doorknob, I'm like, "Arr." It just gets me.
I hear you. My background doesn't.
Right. Ben's
You
like,
just
look at
blow
what I
my
got
skirt
going
up.
on.
Yeah.
Very awesome. Well, you two, as you see comments or anybody that you want to say hey to or whatever, feel free to shout it out. I can see one comment at a time. So this is where Stasia makes me look really good. I'm super excited about today's topic. We're talking about men's emotions. And there was this amazing short that I came across that really brought something, I mean, it really put things in a light for me that I had never kind of thought of. And so I want to go ahead in a second here and play that short. And I want to see what you guys think about it. I want to get your initial reactions to that short, if you think it's right on, if you think it's not. And then I've got some questions. And I think this is an important conversation to have because we as women are really good for being there and showing up for each other. I kind of fall short when it comes to the men in my life sometimes, or, um, just kind of how things are. So we're going to play the short, and then I want to get your thoughts on that. So Stasia, if we could get the link for that, that would be amazing. I didn't click it fast enough.
Sounds good.
Yes. Stasia, do we have the link? There we are. All right.
I did not interview men for the first 4 years of my study. And it wasn't until a man looked at me one day after a book signing and said, "I love what you have to say about shame. I'm curious why you didn't mention men." And I said, "I don't study men." And he said, "That's convenient." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you say to reach out, tell our story, be vulnerable. But you see those books you just signed for my wife and my 3 daughters?" I said, "Yeah. They'd rather me die on top of my white horse than watch me fall down." When we reach out and be vulnerable, we get the shit beat out of us. And don't tell me it's from the guys and the coaches and the dads. Because the women in my life are harder on me than anyone else. So I started interviewing men and asking questions. And what I learned is this. You show me a woman who can actually sit with a man in real vulnerability and fear, I'll show you a woman who's done incredible work. You show me a man who can sit with a woman who's just had it. She can't do it all anymore. And his first response is not, "I unloaded the dishwasher." But he really listens, because that's all we need. I'll show you a guy who's done a lot of work.
So I got to tell you, that clip devastated me. Like, to think that a man in my life, whether it's my husband, my brother, one of the two of you, would feel that way, would really believe that I would rather them die on top of their white horse than to ever say, "I need help." It literally made me cry. I cannot watch that clip and not tear up. So I want to know, Spanks, let's start with you and then we'll go to Ben. What do you think about that? Do you think that's true? Have you felt that in your life? Like, talk about that.
I think the truth in that is not that the women in his life were consciously making that decision, right? I think the truth in that is that like the role of a man in that kind of relationship is to be the anchor and the rock, right? So to be vulnerable, um, I think really takes a special female, um, and vice versa. I think it takes a special sort of connection for that to work out, because there are very and I'm not I'm not really big on tradition. I think that
Mhm.
when tradition dies, it's probably for a good reason. But I think there is some merit to the traditional roles that men and women play in relationships. Um,
Mhm.
Not that it's everything, because it's not, but
Right.
that's my initial take. I've never seen that clip before, and I've never pondered that thought, but that is very interesting. And I can
Mhm.
see in my own experience how that may have been true for my significant others at times. Um,
Mhm.
and how maybe I have failed in being vulnerable before I should have, or when I shouldn't have, and how that might have been not a good thing. Because I can totally relate with what that man said to that lady. The women in my life are definitely hard on me, and it's not because they intend to be.
Mhm.
I don't think that for a second. I think it's just kind of how the cookie crumbles sometimes. I think it's just kind of how men and women interact, and I think it's more instinctual. I don't think that we ever intend, to be that way to each other, right? But that's my
Right.
take.
Right. That's a good. I like that. I like that. Ben, what do you think about that clip?
Well, let's try to not repeat anything that Spanks had already so eloquently said. I
Sorry.
find that, oh no, that was a great run through.
Yeah.
I find that, how do I say this? I find that being vulnerable was one thing that was alien, and probably one of the biggest hindrances I had in seeking help, psychological help, therapy and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. Um, I think there is still, being on the outside looking in, I think it's getting better, but I think there is still an expectation that men behave a certain way and
Mhm.
be more stoic and
Mhm.
a little much more reserved. I
Mhm.
do see that as starting to change, however. But yeah, like I said, I found that reaching out, being emotional, at least for my life, in my life, that it wasn't anything that was encouraged at all. Um,
Mhm.
and I really did find that to be a huge stumbling stone because, first of all, not all men are stoic. Some are.
Mhm.
I personally have deep emotions, and we can see that even in the movies of the day, that there were men of deep emotions, but they were still expected to be like James T. Kirk. I mean, he had deep emotions, but he was still very reserved, to use a fictional persona.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I said, I do see it changing a little bit, somewhat. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong.
I I wonder what do you the men in my life, my dad, my brother, my husband, I guess what hurts me the most as a woman is, and again, we're talking more traditional roles here. That's not that we're not respectful of other things. We're just talking more in a traditional sense here. Um, I did kind of always look to them to be my, and I wrote it down somewhere here. Where did I do it? I always look to them to be my rock, to help me to go to. And I think it's because as a little girl, Like I went to my dad, you know, when things were bad, I went to my dad and he just fixed it. And I wonder, I don't know how to, I don't know how to say this. Like, I think I carried some of that over. And then just the different men in my life kind of took on that, like, oh, here, you know, help me fix this. But I never wanted a man to not be vulnerable to me, to not come to me and talk to me, because to me, that's what makes a relationship important, is when you can do that with each other. And I wonder, Spanks, you said you were vulnerable when you shouldn't have been, and the women in your life were hard on you, but they weren't meant to be. What does that look like when women are hard on you? Like, I mean, I understand. I kind of nag my husband, you know. Sometimes we'll just put that out there. I do, and I'm like, I'm not perfect.
It
But
happens.
what does that look like? Like, what is one thing that, because I don't think it's about anger. I think this is just about is your feelings, your emotions. What's one way that a woman has been hard on you that maybe she didn't realize she was? Because again, I don't want to talk about anger. I don't think this is anger. I think this, for me, is about how are we going to pay these bills? You know, my work really was terrible today, whatever that looked like. So I'm interested to see what you guys have to say in that, because I want to understand that better so I can be better.
I can only speak from personal experience. And
Mm-hmm.
am I getting an echo? Okay, I'm
No.
better. Ba. And I think that's because it's not. It's more of an energy exchange kind of thing. I
Mm-hmm.
think that men and women experience emotions differently, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how applicable my case is to other men. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like my experience might be unique, but who knows? Maybe not. Maybe everybody's just like this. But I feel like specifically, you asked about. I had said that I had been too vulnerable when I shouldn't have, maybe, and
Mm-hmm.
then the women in my life were hard on me and not intended to.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking on the former, the first part of that,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a general theme for me. I'm a very emotional human. I
Mm-hmm.
experience very intense emotions, and I can't compare it to anything else because I don't know how other people experience emotions, right? But I know that for me, it's a very deep, intense experience a lot of the time, frequently. So I
Mm-hmm.
also recognize that very often, historically, in relationships, for me, I have to uh, decide how much to let my significant other experience of my emotions, how much to be vulnerable, how much to open up, how much to let her see and have. Because, and I don't know exactly why this is, but it seems like if I do that too much or too quickly, I open that valve a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to handle it. They can't do it. And I don't know if that's because I'm not balanced. I don't know if that's because I'm not expressing it properly, but
Mm-hmm.
I like very much the example in the clip that you played, where she
Mm-hmm.
described the two different sides and how they differ. She
Mm-hmm.
described how, and maybe we could watch the clip again, but I feel like she said,
Yeah.
maybe if I get it wrong, it sounded like she said that a woman needs to be listened to, and in a crisis, that's what a man does, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
sounded like on the flip side, it doesn't work out quite that way. And I don't remember what her example was, but that has been my experience. Is that I feel like an effective rock in that sense when it's very needed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like it's not that way other times, but in those moments, I feel like that rang true for me. Her example, and
Right.
I definitely feel like the flip side has definitely been non-reciprocal, and I don't know why that is. I don't think it's intended. Obviously, in a
Yeah.
perfect world, we want to be there for each other. I feel
Right.
like it's difficult. Maybe it's because the men don't know what they want or what they need, or maybe it's because who knows why, right? But I do
Right.
notice that disconnect, and My relationships have been much more fruitful
Mhm.
and long-lived when I have monitored how much vulnerability to allow
So
closely.
then, do you feel like there's always a part of you that you're holding back? Do you feel like there's ever been any one woman who's really ever gotten all of you? Or have you always kind of held that back a little bit?
I think Roxy got everything, and
Mhm.
Lucy may have too. I don't know. Who's to say? But it's also difficult because it's not like I'm doing it any differently for women than I am for the entire world. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's the same.
Mhm.
You just want to be vulnerable, or I want to be vulnerable with that
Mhm.
person, especially. You know what I mean? I have
Mhm.
incentive to be that
Right.
way. So it's
Right.
especially important in those cases, I think. But I monitor that valve constantly. Um,
Wow.
so I don't think it's a different function. I just think that it's more important to me personally in that instance.
Right. Right. Um, Ben, what are your thoughts on being vulnerable? Have you ever just opened that valve and had it go full bore, or do you also find yourself like kind of holding back? And it doesn't have to be romantic relationships. It can be
Yeah.
friendships. It can be anything. Um,
Um, I find, at least in my case, and I realize I do
mhm.
not represent anybody by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination, I
Yeah.
find that in my case, I was really super reserved all the way up, even after when I sought treatment. I mean, that marked
Mhm.
a noted change in
Mhm.
how I dealt with things. But I find, at least with my childhood, a lot of things that occurred in it, there was always the unsaid thing where no, you're not supposed to be emotional. And
Mhm.
I find that in my case that it attract that non-emotional need.
Mhm.
When I would express it, it was often negative consequences for it. That non-emotional
Mhm.
need I experience, or the need to be non-emotional to be societally accepted, drove me to be more object oriented, which is really odd considering I am an extrovert or close to being an ambivert. Um,
Mhm.
that was the only way I found that I could deal with that, was to simply hang around equipment and things. And
Right.
like Spanks said, when you would express emotions to a romantic partner,
Mhm.
there were usually negative consequences in a way. You know, it's like you're being songs of the day. You would often have females saying, I'm thinking of a song by Fiona, "Talk to Me." There were several
Mhm.
songs in the 80s and the 70s where that was the theme. Come on, we need to talk. But yet there was, at the same time, there seemed to be an image that no, you don't talk. So it really seemed to be an interesting contradiction. And with friends, you brought up that non romantic
Mhm.
relationship. It fell more into an expected role more than anything. You can be emotional, but you can only express anger, happiness, certain emotions, but you can't express depression. Oh, certainly not. You
Yeah.
can't express
Mm.
any sort of emotional need. At least generally with the guys I hung out with, that was a big no, you don't do that.
Yeah.
Um, and it would typically come out. That would come out. That quality would come out with men in general. I noticed when some of them would get drunk, and there was always and I realize you're talking a mind altering substance, still, even
Sure.
with alcohol. but there was always negative connotations for, oh, that guy's a sad drunk. I don't want to hang around with him. Don't get him, going. Um,
Mm.
and there was definitely, at least in social circles, there was definitely an unsaid expectation to be more reserved. You could be happy. You could be the one jumping around. Everybody was fine with that, but you could
Right.
not. You certainly wouldn't express any sort of vulnerability. That only existed for writers and poets and people in movies. They would express some, but still, I find that a marked difference in the 60s and 70s movies, the way
Mhm.
men would behave versus 80s, 90s, and into the double O's.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
so that was pretty much my experience.
Do you,
I have a
um
question
yes.
for you, Christy. When
Okay.
you show emotions and are vulnerable with your girlfriends, do they take advantage of you?
No.
Because that's what happens to
No.
dudes
Yeah.
a lot of the
Really.
time. Yeah.
See, that's what I was
Especially
gonna. Yeah.
in like I mean, when I'm surrounded by my people, that doesn't happen, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
most people, like acquaintances, right? That's a natural thing. It's a dog eat dog world out there for emotional dudes for sure, 100%. Yeah.
So, does it feel like you just go through your life like half on? I mean, like if there's does it feel like that at all? I mean, does
I
that
think it's
make sense?
funny.
What are you laughing at? What I do?
He nodded and I shook my head. I thought that was funny. I'm on all the time, all the way. You can't turn this off. In fact, my substance abuse goes all the way back to that. I was trying to turn the volume down all the time and succeeded, right, for
Right,
a temporary amount of time. But
right.
yeah, I can't turn it off for sure.
Let's take a look at the comments, or not the comments, but it looks like we've got 3 questions. So, Stasia, if you want to put up the question, um, is this one of the questions? My husband of 32 years is very gentle, nonviolent, and emotions are often loaded with anger. I sometimes wonder if it's because he has just a hard time processing intense emotion. Do you guys, so I have a question. Why are we, and I'm gonna, bear with me. You know how I can be. Um, I find it interesting that we're talking about men's emotion and everybody's talking about anger, right? Like, I wanted to talk about feeling vulnerable and feeling sad and feeling depressed and feeling all of these different things. And the one thing that keeps coming up is anger, and that saddens me a little bit because it's like that's the okay thing for guys to say, to do, to be. But what about the others? Like I don't know. It's just
Well, I could see how that plays when you think about what anger is, a violation of your value system. At
Mhm,
first, you may have minor things that would make you sad. I'm so sad this
mhm,
happened. Depression, sadness, all those quote negative. I'll use that term, negative emotions. Um,
mhm.
if you don't express those, eventually that will pile up. And so eventually, instead of dealing with, oh, I'm sad my dog died. I'm sad my car got destroyed. Name, several minor events. Eventually, if you don't express that, I find, at least in my case, that would build, and eventually you're blowing up at something that's completely inconsequential, and
Mm.
you just have a fit of anger, and it's like, where did this come from? And it's because you
Right.
built up all that stuff in your past, all those disappointments, all the times that you were hurt, and you tend not to let that out, that I think it will come out as anger.
Wow.
I agree. I totally agree. And to that question or statement that was up,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that's probably why his behavior is laden with anger, is because he hasn't found a way to express his emotions. So that's the way it's coming out. And I feel like anger is like the emotional, like steam coming off of the hot engine or whatever. It's just relieving
Oh,
the temperature in there. I think it's like a natural response, because otherwise, what's going to happen? I don't know. Who knows? I might actually spontaneously explode. That's how it
right.
feels like, at least when you bottle it up like that. And I don't know if I'm skipping here, but Izzy
No, go.
mentioned, do you have the feeling that emotions are associated with weakness in men? Looking at the men around me, it's almost as if the only acceptable emotion is anger. And I just feel like it's more generally acceptable in society. I feel like, um, going back to the tradition thing, I feel like a lot of us were raised, to think of this in a certain way. Anger is almost normalized because you see so much of it. And that might be because men aren't expressing their emotions properly. So all your examples of men are blowing off steam. But who really knows, right? Who's to say? I don't think that emotion is a sign of weakness in men. I think that it is taken that way frequently.
Yeah.
But I also just don't think that we have learned how to use emotion as a strength, like collectively, as men. I'm not saying I think that I have a pretty, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I think that I definitely see how it can be, how this could be, right? But as a collective, we haven't reached that point yet.
I think you can
And
see some of the. Oh, go ahead.
oh, that's great. Well, I was going to say, going back to that clip, and maybe we'll play it again here in a second. I think it's interesting that she says that for a woman to sit with a man in his in his real emotion is a woman that's done a lot of work. God, you guys, this just hurts my soul. Like, why should a why is that? I mean, if you look at it, she's basically saying, in order for us to sit with each other, we have had to do a lot of work. So a woman who can sit with a man in true vulnerability has done a lot of work, and a man who can sit with a woman has done a lot of work. And shouldn't we just instinctively be able to sit with another human and just let them be
We can,
human?
we can. We just have to let go of decades and generations of programming and brainwashing, and
Good point.
also probably
Brainwashing.
like generations of instinctual, like genetic misbehavior, because for generations, as long as time immemorial, I don't think that humans have been very good to each other. So I think it's a problem of this age. We're learning that this is necessary. So now we're figuring out how to make it real.
Right, right. Ben, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, and Spanks did a really good job with that. I think we was talking about societal roles and the
Mm-hmm.
traditional programming. I was just going to say, I think you can spot this in more male-oriented roles now. This certainly, is not always the rule now, but you look at roles that were generally geared towards men: military, welders, boat builders, architect. Well, I mean architects, but carpenters, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those, you typically don't have emotional sides to those. Those are more hard, factual, especially military. Military is a
Yeah,
prime example where the only emotion
right.
you can really express is anger.
Yeah,
And I imagine for people who are in the military who are married, that the at home life should be, probably where you dump all that emotion. But, does it happen? Probably not, which is be the reason. And the same police officers, probably the
right.
reason why divorce is so incredibly high in those. And, as Spank said, There's a lot of genetic memory going on with that, and people constantly say, how do you know genetic memory is a thing? Well, who taught you how to shiver when you're cold? There's some examples of genetic
Right.
memory. But men were typically the hunters, just because of the
Mhm.
physical size and abilities.
Mhm.
Generally, they were typically the hunters and the gatherers, and the women played more of a nurturing role. And
Mhm.
that could just be a result of that being handed down, even through the Industrial Revolution.
Wow. This just, I don't, I've never really been in a position where I just kind of don't know what to say. Um, because I don't think, honestly, well, and I want to thank you too, and everybody in the comments for being so honest with me about this, because I've never really just sat down with two guys that I respect and been like, all right, let's talk about your feelings. So thank you for being here for that, because I'm learning a lot from you too. And this is why I wanted to do this. I see that we've got a couple more pinned comments, Stasia. If you want to go ahead and put those up so we can address those. I don't want anybody to feel left out in something that that you looked at. Um, what measures could we make as a society to make men more comfortable communicating their vulnerability? Izzy, that's an amazing question. Do you think that it's us women need to heal a little bit more and see you as that we need to accept that you have emotions other than anger and learn how to sit with you in those? I feel like it's on both sides. I don't think this is a one-sided
Mhm.
thing.
I don't think it's transactional at all. I don't think anyone's to
Yeah.
blame. I think that it is a natural occurrence and it might just have come about naturally because of the way things are in the world or whatever, right? But I do
Yeah.
think that one thing that does come to mind that I think helps a ton in communication in general doesn't necessarily have
Mm-hmm.
to be just from females, but from everyone, especially when we're talking about being vulnerable and sharing emotions. Don't react, just
Mm-hmm.
take it in,
Mm.
sit with it, don't react. Reacting is the worst thing that you can do. And I feel like I often have received that, especially when what we're sharing is deep or astounding, or surprising.
Right.
It's easy to react.
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
and often, especially if it's like something you don't expect or it's overwhelming or something like that, it's easy to react poorly. So I
And
think
it
that
is
would be.
hard. It is hard as a woman, because I know that I've been told things by various men in my life, and I've really had to just let him say it, whatever it is. And there's been some shocking things, and I think that's good. I agree with Brazzy Girl. Yes, very well said. Not reacting initially, because I'll tell you, my initial reactions are always not good. Is very important, because that's how you build that trust and how you build the safety with anyone, not just men and women. Um, okay, hello, butterfly. Question: do you think these mindsets of both men and women are changing? Do you feel like you could have a healthier relationship with someone who allowed you to be more vulnerable? That's a really good question.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I That can be answered with a simple yes. You can see that being played out in multiple. I hate to keep using movies as an example, but
No, no, go for
they
it.
are a good way you can kind of take societal temperature, or at least societal expectations. You can kind of get a read on that. But I think I think you see that changing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we are in the age of Aquarius, so it's all about changing and being enlightened and bringing wisdom to things. So hopefully this is something that is really changing for the better. I think this is something we need to bring attention to. Spanks, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, and the first part of that question, do you think these mindsets of both men and women are changing? I feel like there's a shift happening for sure. I definitely feel like the feminine is coming more into the foreground and the masculine is kind of going back into the background, for a lack of a better way to describe that. But it definitely feels that way. It definitely feels like the yin and yang are shifting in their balances of power, so to speak.
Right.
And maybe it's just a not power. Maybe it's knowledge and understanding. Maybe it's, I don't know. Who knows? Who's to say? I am no magician, but it's an exciting time.
Yes.
You might not be a magician, but you are a magician with your words. So,
Mystify.
I have a question, and this is and I do have a bunch of other things here that I kind of want to touch on, but um, some of my friends, my girlfriends, joke that men don't know how to handle strong, independent women. Would you say that that is a true statement, or do you think that's false? Because I really kind of feel like, you know, I, I mean, are we that complicated to deal with?
I feel like transactional thinking like that doesn't serve a two-way street at all. Because
Okay.
in the end, I don't know why my microphone's over there. In the end, I don't love someone because they like do something for me. I love them because I
Right.
choose to love them. You know what I mean? I love them because like I can't help it. So it's not a transaction from the get-go. So making judgments, assessments,
Uh-huh.
decisions, communicating based on like a transactional kind of thing. Like I can't remember what you said now, so I can't use it as an example, but I feel like you understand what I'm saying. I try
Yeah,
not
yeah,
to do
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and it's my natural instinct to be transactional. I don't
Right.
know why. Maybe it's because I've been so down, right, for so long, but
Uh-huh.
I don't think that it serves because everything's going to be taken care of, right?
Right.
Um, everything's going to work out just fine.
I love
Anyways,
that you keep coming back to transactional thinking because I never thought of it that way. I never thought of it as a transaction. But it makes a lot of sense when you say that. It reframes it for me in my own mind in a different way that I had not thought of. Um,
super
and
game changing concept for me when I discovered it. A friend of mine
yeah,
back in Salt Lake showed me this concept and changed everything.
right. I love that. I love that. Ben, did you have any insight on any of that?
Um, it's an odd question because I can always you can always think of a niche, whatever,
Mm-hmm,
of men that are attracted to that,
mm-hmm,
specifically to that mindset. I don't know if it's quite as simple as that. So I don't know.
fair enough.
It's just
I
really
was
a
thinking the
complex
same
question.
thing. I
Yeah.
was thinking the same thing.
Um, yeah, but
Nice.
yeah. I just don't think it's simple as that.
I like that. So in this case, my girlfriends are the ones that are being transactional, that are kind of really simplifying this to a way that doesn't fit.
Well,
And I love that.
can I talk about that a little bit?
Of course. Go.
I think the reason, so like transactional thinking serves in the short run, right? Because you're going to make a good deal that's going to get you a good return in
Mhm,
whatever we're talking about, right? Looking out for
mhm,
numero uno, which is important. It's an important concept to
mhm.
learn to take care of me. That's something I had to learn.
Right.
I would take care of other people first for some reason was my natural instinct. But I think that this is a new like so not being transactional serves more in a long term and more of like a spiritual and like a trusting kind of sense. It's like this kind of a new way of thinking, right? Um, it's not anchored in the concrete in what I can touch, right? It's anchored in I do things because I feel like it. I do things because I choose to. It's a
Mhm,
different, entirely different set of rules, right? But I do think that it serves more in the long run. You might not be making the best deal right now, today, in this moment, in this transaction, right? but in the long run, you're living heart forward. You're communicating. You're doing things for the right reasons, not because they bring you monetary gain or elevate your position or make you. I mean, they are making you feel better, but isn't that what it's about? It's about the experience and the journey, and that's how. I think that is why it's new, and that's why it's difficult, because it's I don't know. Yeah, it's a total flip side.
Sure.
It is, but I mean, isn't that what we should be doing though? Is living our life for a longer term result instead of just the short term? Because I always kind of equate it to like a fire. You can start a fire with paper and gasoline and twigs. It's not going to get you anywhere. You have to add to that and get that sustainability. So I really love that. That is I think it kind of sounds like people are a little short-sighted, short-sighted sometimes. And that in itself really causes issues. And you know what? Honestly, Spanks, I had never even looked at it that way. I had never even thought of it as, no, really, really, because, you kind of just, and I think that, some women that I know have kind of fallen into this trap of, oh, well, I'm just too independent and I'm too much. And no, you're not. It's maybe you're being too short-sighted and you're not allowing that energy, like you said, that energy exchange to fully happen. That's wow.
And what gets me about Spanks is talking about transactional is especially his description. I find to be quite interesting. That
Yeah.
how do I say? Oh, they're one of the habits of highly successful people. I'm not talking 7 habits. One of
Right.
the qualities a lot of them express, or a lot of them have, is delaying short-term gratification for long-term health. And when you think about it, a lot of our society is driven exactly by the short-term gratification. That's how we get involved in a lot of chemical dependency and things like that. You aren't looking at long-term, what's my long-term health? What's my long-term well-being? And that's just how, unfortunately, it's how our instant society is built, though.
Right. Wow.
I think capitalism has a lot to do with that, and I'm a fan. But getting my coffee and my food right now, very fast. It's prepared for me. There's a lot of things in society that are kind of geared towards that quick, ask questions later kind of thinking.
There's something up on the screen right now that I can see. I don't know who it's from. It says girls/women are more encouraged to recognize emotions, or maybe they do it with other women. What is that? Because I feel like I want to address that. I don't know who said that. Question: how good, in your opinion, can boys and men identify emotions they have inside versus girls or women? Aren't girls or women more encouraged to recognize and analyze emotions, or maybe they do it with other women?
I think that's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. How could I know how women process their emotions? I mean, they may display it differently, right? I may be able to judge how they're displaying their emotions, right? But I have no idea what's going on under the surface. I know what I'm doing, I don't know if
Right.
I could explain it. I could definitely try, but I think that's a hard comparison.
Speaking as a woman, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. So I do think that girls and women are encouraged to display emotions a little bit more. I think it's kind of one of those. I know my husband, when I'm really emotional, he'll take my hand and he'll be like, it'll be okay. It's going to be okay. And it's kind of one of those things to get me out of my own head that he does. It's really kind of funny and it makes me laugh. And I'm like, no, it won't be. And he's like, no, I swear it will be. But I do think we're a little easier to do that. So I do think that traditionally, now again, y'all, I'm 48. I'm Gen X, right? So traditionally, I do believe that that was a thing. And when women get together, we do share our emotions and we do share those things with each other that I think that guys probably don't get together and do. I don't know that you do. I don't know that you don't. But I do feel that traditionally women probably are encouraged a little bit more. And then I think, but then I think that kind of goes the other way too, where having been a single mom and a single woman, you have to kind of step into your masculine power because now you're the one that's having to provide and do these other things. And so then that can kind of flip the switch a little bit too in how you see that. I had something that I heard something, this is very interesting, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Again, it was a short, I didn't save it, but it was a guy talking, and he said, it's not that you feel like you have nobody, it's like nobody has you. Do you feel, does that resonate with you at all? Do you feel that in a different way?
Oh yeah, for sure. Nobody has my back like I have my back. And I don't know like if that's less true for women, but I don't know. Finding someone I would consider a true friend is not a common occurrence, regardless of their sex.
Mm-hmm.
And
See,
like,
I feel. Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, I like one of Ray Ray's comments. If a guy cries in a public space, women will run away. That's generally true.
See, I run to that person. Like, I don't run away from that because if I see a man just sitting down crying in public, first of all, that's a very uncommon thing from my generation to see. So, I'm gonna go over and be like, what happened? And to me, I have seen men cry, men have cried in front of me. It hurts me on a soul level because I know that that's not the people who have done that, that's not their baseline. That's not something that they just show the world. And so it makes me much more aware that this is out of the norm. And who I am, I can't speak to everybody. I want to comfort that. So I wouldn't run away from that. I don't, and I haven't. And I'm sorry that you had that experience because I know as a woman, if I sit down and cried in public, I would have a lot of people around me.
I think that you're special.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's necessarily the sentiment shared by the majority of women. I also think that in a lot of cases, when men display that kind of emotion, it doesn't look like a guy sitting down crying, especially because of the suppressive nature or the suppressive teachings or whatever, however you want to say that. I think that often when men display those emotions, especially in public or something like that, is not what it looks like. It's very scary. So
Right.
don't beat yourself up too much. I think that you're special, though. I think a lot of people would not approach that man.
See, that hurts my soul. It really does.
Sorry.
I'm being serious. Like I want to cry right now.
I know.
That just hurts my soul because I mean, and then to be fair, the men that I have seen cried do not ugly cry the way that I cry, where it's like, it is like very, very just kind of, you almost don't even see it. So, wow, I just, do you think that the clips, Stasia, can we play that clip one more time? Because it was really good and I want to just play it one more time. And to be honest, I didn't even necessarily know who this woman was or anything. I just seen it and I was like, we got to talk about this. All right, I'm going to play it real quick.
Here, I'm going to run to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Go for it.
I did not interview men for the first 4 years of my study. And it wasn't until a man looked at me one day after a book signing and said, I love what you have to say about shame. I'm curious why you didn't mention men. And I said, I don't study men. And he said, that's convenient. And I said, why? And he said, because you say to reach out, tell our story, be vulnerable. But you see those books you just signed for my wife and my 3 daughters? I said, yeah. They'd rather me die on top of my white horse than watch me fall down. When we reach out and be vulnerable, we get the shit beat out of us. And don't tell me it's from the guys and the coaches and the dads. Because the women in my life are harder on me than anyone else. So I started interviewing men and asking questions. And what I learned is this. You show me a woman who can actually sit with a man in real vulnerability and fear, I'll show you a woman who's done incredible work. You show me a man who can sit with a woman who's just had it. She can't do it all anymore. And his first response is not, I unloaded the dishwasher. But he really listens, because that's all we need. I'll show you a guy who's done a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Every time I watch it. So Spanks, did you hear that? Did you hear that at the end, the comparison that you had mentioned earlier?
I did.
What does it look like? I just, wow. I wanted to ask you, your male role models, do you think that they taught you healthy or unhealthy coping mechanisms, or is that a transactional way of thinking?
I think that my dad went through great lengths to try and teach me proper coping mechanisms, but couldn't help but also teach me some bad ones. And I don't think that's transactional. I mean, analyzing stuff, sometimes you need to weigh it, right? Maybe that's the Libra in me. I don't know. But I think that's a little different.
Right.
And I know in my case, there was absolutely none of that. And that could just be, I mean, I may not necessarily represent a portion of, but we could just be 2 individual different experiences. But I think a little bit of that may just be a sign of the times too.
Right.
Being from different eras. Spanks is still made of rubber and he's still bulletproof and everything else.
That was my rubber face.
and yes, Ray. I am in front of a green screen. I'm actually I'm actually in Egypt right now.
I was going to say you're at the alien base, aren't you?
Oh yeah,
Area 52.
yeah.
We don't even know about that.
So I have another question. And again, this was from another short, because I kind of went down this little rabbit hole of, okay, let me see what all's out there. What do you wish that women understood more about men's emotions or expressing them, or just in general? Like, I know it's a very overarching question, but is there one thing that you like, if you could just tell everybody that you kind of wish, like, what would that be?
I feel like what I want to say might already be common knowledge, so I don't I hesitate, but I'm going to say it, and I guess you can tell me. I feel like you probably already know this, but just judging by what you've said here today in this live, but I feel like what men need most is support, right? Because that's what we have lacked in the emotional department, right? So I guess just understanding that's really the best help is support, being a support, right? I don't know, but also I don't know. I don't know.
No, it's a good answer, and to quantify that, support looks different for everybody. It's going to look different for Spanks as it does for Ben, as it does for my husband, and as it does for my brother. And so I think that's good. But I mean, that's something that we can give people, right? Is support, and um, that's a really good answer. Ben, do you have
Wow.
anything?
Beyond what Spanks already said, I can't think of anything.
I'm
Because that's,
sorry.
well, no,
I
you think
know
about support.
he's on fire today. I
Yeah,
love
he is. Yes, he is.
it.
And I do find it interesting that we have two guys here that are generally more towards the feeling side of things. I do find
Right,
that to
right.
be highly interesting. Um,
That might be why we get along so well, though,
yeah,
or a contributing factor at the very least.
yeah. Yeah, and I do find that, there's one of my favorite quotes: the organism does what made the organism successful. The
Mhm,
guys will tend to establish, well, not guys, people will tend
mhm,
to establish what's expected of them, what works for them as a child, and carry those behaviors into
mhm,
adulthood.
mhm.
And as oftentimes is the case, those childhood learned lessons that helped us get by as a child don't necessarily serve us as an adult. So I think
Yeah.
it's something which, yeah, and you see this in recovery groups, you see this in body language, you see it in the lifeboat. There's a lot higher representation of women than there is men,
Mhm,
generally in those.
mhm,
And I think that maybe as therapy becomes more and more common,
mhm.
maybe the problem will solve itself. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, that same expectation, I find it to be interesting because that, at least in my life, and I can't speak for anybody else, that is what really led to me coming to a crisis point, because I felt like who am I going to talk to? My mother,
Mhm,
my romantic interests. I
mhm,
didn't have a therapist at that point. My guy
mhm,
friends, you know,
mhm.
um, we had a very different group back then, and I think society is probably coming along, at least in this, hearing about how Spanks has his close tribe that he's able
Mhm.
to relate with, probably much better than I could with my group.
Right.
I mean, we were
Right.
still emotionally, close, but yeah, you definitely don't cry to another friend. You don't do any of these negative things. You just, oh man, you can talk about the hard things like, oh, my car broke, my dog died, and things like that, but you couldn't say that with, oh, I'm so sad about this. Just, oh, dude, man,
Mhm.
that sucks.
It's worth noting that I didn't develop that circle of people that like were okay with that until, I don't know, like 25, 26,
Mhm,
until I found
mhm.
fire, until I found the fire dancing and that whole community. Before that, I was just like everyone else. I just had a different dad, kind of thing.
Right. Wow.
Also, I don't mean to interrupt you, Ben. Okay. I think it's also worth bringing up here the transactional thinking thing. I feel like I can think of a lot of instances where sharing emotions and being vulnerable with my significant other turned into a misunderstanding or a disagreement or even a full blown row, um, based on transactional thinking. And maybe it's like the kind of thing where like, I do all of this for you. Why don't, why can't you just do this for me kind of thing? And I think the reality is that we can't really fully understand everything that we do for each other, right? Even if I were to
Right.
explain it to you, which I'm not going to do, because there's an infinite
Right.
list
Right.
of things that I'm doing differently because I want, you know, you to
Mhm,
be happy, kind of thing. So I
mhm.
think that moving away from transactional thinking where it serves, I think is a big deal because
Hmm.
those kind of those kind of rows or misunderstandings or disagreements can all be avoided if we don't do things because someone does something for us.
I
Right.
I do find what Spanks says to be interesting too, because
Mhm.
you can see this in therapy, and I'm massively oversimplifying it. But
Me
we had
too.
we had a book in the early 70s, I'm okay, you're okay, and that was talking about transactional analysis, how somebody's how you're talking to somebody, it's a parent child, it's a and all that. And it's interesting how the mindset has changed away from that into, like we were discussing before the show, with CBT being
Mhm.
very non-traditional, non-70s type of psychology. So maybe this will solve itself if given enough time.
Right. Well,
I'm not a prophet. I'm not a son of a prophet, and I work for a nonprofit company. So who knows?
and I mean, how disheartening is it to think that an intimate relationship, and an intimate relationship could be between romantic partners or friends, that it comes down to a transaction. Like, I never looked at it that way. Like, well, I'm doing this for you. What am I getting out of this in return? Um, I've been guilty of that, and I've done that. And when I did that, it was, again, please don't be like me. It was to say, hey, look at all these things that I do for you that looks this certain way. I listen to you talk about your day. Again, this was unhealed, Christy. Okay. I listen to you talk about your day, and I listen to you complain about all of this, and I just want 5 minutes of your time. That is such a disheartening thing, because maybe you don't have the emotional bandwidth at that time to give me 5 minutes. It doesn't mean that you don't love me.
I
It
know I've
means
been
that
there.
you just worked, again, to kind of use my husband. You work 60 hours a week. You deal with people all day. You're doing this. You come home. Maybe you just don't have it in you for 5 minutes. And I never, truthfully, Spanks, I never looked at it that way until just now, and
And
until you
how do you
said
tell
that.
how do you tell your significant other, like, I don't have 5 minutes for you? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like, I can't say
right,
that. I'm not
right,
capable.
exactly. Because then crazy, angry Hobbit cheese tucking Christy, who turns into a spider monkey, is going to come out, and you don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
So I understand that. Like, it puts you in a position where you cannot win. Like, I am unknowingly putting you into a position where the fight's going to get worse, or you either just drop it and let me think in a very wrong way that that's not you, that I'm not important, and neither one of those things are true. Like, that's very interesting, because you're right. How do you look at an angry woman and say that, and say the truth? Like, I want you to tell me the truth, but could I, okay, here you go, Ben, Jack Nicholson. Could I really handle the truth if you looked at me and said, don't have 5 minutes? No, I'm not. I'm not going to handle that well.
And
That's
often we
interesting.
don't realize that we don't have 5 minutes. I don't
Hmm.
know why I feel the way I feel. I don't know that
Right.
doing what I did at the airport for 60 hours this week, installing conveyor belt electrical systems, um, made it so that I don't have time emotionally for my significant other. I don't know that. I just know that I'm not
Right.
stoked, and I probably need a meal and to feel better, so I'm going to go ahead and
Right.
try and make that happen.
Right.
That's a very good point. It's like
Yeah.
even in fight or flight, we don't recognize we're in that when we're in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's but you think about the alternative, and this is just relationship difficulties, which is a pretty massive subject.
Mm-hmm.
You think about it, when one partner's in that space, I'm
Mm-hmm.
having a crisis, somebody else comes home and they're still in a completely different headspace of, I'm dealing with, I just did this, and this, you're emotionally spent. What's the
Mhm.
alternative? I mean, because one person's at an emotional point and we don't think clearly when we're at that point. So I guess it's just one of those things where it would probably take very honest communication at some point saying, when I come home, I don't necessarily have that reserve for you. You're important to me. I want to be a good listener, but it's a disservice to you for me to come home and not give you the attention when I'm not able to.
Mhm.
That's probably be the
Mhm.
solution to that.
So, Stasia, what is this example 1 and 2? I'm happy to listen to your day after I've had 30 minutes. In communication, qualifying our bandwidth and stating our needs beforehand greatly helps. Honey, I need to vent. I don't have energy beyond that. Do you have a minute? Not looking for a solution. I just need to vent to someone and move on with my day. Can you be that ear? I'm happy to listen to your day after I've had 30 minutes of alone time. Izzy, I think that's a good idea in theory. I can tell you and I'm just speaking from my personal, uh, I wouldn't get through that whole thing before my husband would um, shut that down and be like, not now. Doesn't mean that we don't love each other. Doesn't mean that we're not committed to each other and that we can't help each other. I think having that conversation when you're both in a good headspace is very important. Um, and but again, Spanks, what you said to me just keeps sticking in my head. Like, how do you say that to somebody? Like, how do you say, I just don't? Because maybe one day you've got 5 minutes, and maybe one day you don't even have 5 seconds.
Saying
You
that to your
know?
significant other is akin to admitting that I am failing, that I can't do
Yeah.
this.
Right. Right. And I can see where, going back to the short, um, I don't want to think of you as failing. Not because I've got you on some pedestal, but me personally, I just I don't want to see anybody around me fail. And so then I'm going to try to fix you. And then you don't need me to fix you because you can manage yourself. I mean, hell, I don't know. But I can see that. And this is a good thing too. Men's studies are important to originate with men. We can't speak for their gender. Absolutely not. And I am not speaking for men. I am going off of the experiences I have had with those men in my life who have essentially been cowboys and welders, construction workers. Um, wow. You guys, this has been amazingly enlightening. I knew I was going to learn something from you two today. I had no idea that I was going to learn this. Um, this is, it's been a beautiful conversation. I feel like I haven't always asked the questions in the right way, but you guys have been amazing at explaining it in a way that has brought up a lot for me that I never even thought of,
Good, I'm glad.
you know. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to change how I see things going forward. And I'm thankful. I'm grateful.
Me too. This was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually
Um,
have a closing thought. I don't know if it's too much. Do you want to hear it?
yes, I want to hear it. I was actually getting ready to ask closing thoughts. So lay it on us.
A wise man once asked me, do you feel like you move through the world and change the world around you, or do you feel like you move through the world and the world changes you? And I thought about that. It was kind of hard to answer. And then after I answered, he asked, which would you prefer to be? Would you prefer to change the world or have the world change you? Just a thought. A very morally based dilemma.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong answer,
Sure.
but knowing the answer, finding your answer will, I think, help you move through the world more effectively.
Did you find your answer?
Yeah.
Good. Good. Good.
That is a deep self-analysis there. I think Spank is, even though he doesn't have the receding hairline like and the self-reflective head like mine does, he
It's
is very
there, dude.
self-reflective.
It's hiding right now. I got the comb over going on, dude.
I would add probably the best solution to the bandwidth problem is probably like expressing a boundary to somebody who doesn't respect boundaries. The time to bring it up is when you are in a good headspace. You know, when I come home, you know, this
Mhm.
may be the case. You know, that that's probably the only way around it. Otherwise, it's going to be a heated argument on one side or the other. And the same with the boundary. You don't establish the boundary when it's been, you know, you wait, because otherwise it seems like you're being vindictive against the person you're
Mhm.
establishing the boundary with. So
Mhm. Mhm.
just my 2 cents.
Well, I don't normally share final thoughts. I leave that to my guest, but I am going to share that I learned about transactional relationships. And that is something I'm going to think on further and look on further and see how I can better myself in that. And I think this conversation has been beautiful. And again, I'm just so appreciative of both of you taking your time to come on here and to talk about this. Like I said, I wasn't sure how it was going to go. I knew it was going to be amazing. I just didn't know like how to guide it and direct it. But this has
You did
turned
great.
into something that I didn't even know I needed.
Me too, to
So
be honest.
thank you so much. You guys stick around. I'm going to have Stasia take us out in a second, but we've got some fun stuff coming up on the channel. We're going to be talking about alone time versus isolating. We're going to talk about separation from unhealthy relationships and what that looks like. We are going to be talking Roswell soon, and we've got some more really exciting Beyond the Boat interviews coming up. So you guys stay tuned for all of that so we can get to know our fellow crew members better. And thank you everybody for showing up. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, all of that good stuff. You guys stay close, and we're going to let Stasia take us out.